Hi, readers. Welcome back to my channel. I'm happy to share with you the books that I read in the month of June. I had a good reading month in June. I read 7 books, which for me is quite an accomplishment. So I am going to attribute it to summer and longer days and maybe just, I don't know, picking the right books to get through. I did take a couple of days off. I think that helped as well. So let's talk about what I read in the month of June, and I will present them in the order in which I completed them. How's that? So the first book I read, I hauled on Libro.fm in the month of May. I think I pre-purchased it. So I think I talked about it in my May book haul. But nevertheless, that is Drowning by T.J. Newman. I had to look because I wanted to call her T.K. Newman. My apologies. When I first started talking about this book on a previous video, I referred to T.J. Newman as a man, and T.J. Newman is in fact a woman. She's a former pilot as well as a bookseller who then wrote a book called Falling, which was like rocketed to success and was named by a variety of different sources, including USA Today, as one of the best novels. And so clearly that one is now on my radar to take a look at. But I finished Drowning. Drowning is her second novel, and there's a lot of buzz about it, and a lot of people are reading it, and I enjoyed it very much. I listened to it very quickly. It was very fast-paced. It is a kind of what I guess I would call a popcorn thriller because you can't kind of stop looking at it in one kind of setting like you would in a movie with a bucket of popcorn. It is about a man named Will Trent and his daughter Shannon who are going away on a flight from the island, I think, of Hawaii. And Will and his wife Chris are somewhat estranged. And so he takes off. It's not far from the island that their plane goes down. There's an engine malfunction and the plane plummets into the ocean and catches on a bit of an underwater cliff. And so this is a cliffhanger, literally and metaphorically. Their plane immediately fills with water, and the passengers are trying to decide what to do and how to stay alive. The synopsis gives you a lot more than this, but I'm just going to say that it is pretty incredible in some ways, in a good way, incredible, and kind of predictable in other ways, but still nonetheless satisfying. I gave it 4 stars. And again, it was really well done. I would read Falling by her as well, which I think also involves a plane somehow. There's a theme for sure. The next book I read was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I started this a while ago. I did not complete it then. I got distracted and wasn't quite into it, so I gave it another shot during June because it was Pride Month and I thought this would be a great read for me. I could not figure out why I wasn't getting into it like other people are. Like, other people love this book. It's like a huge 5 stars. It's like one of their favorite books of all time. I just wasn't getting into it. And I don't know why. But I finished it, and I finished it feeling better about it than I did while I was in the midst of it, if that makes sense. So I think that when I finally got toward the end, it started to click in for me. I think it was maybe just not moving. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's probably me. But let's just talk about what this book is about in the event that you're one of the 10 people in the world that don't know. It follows a social worker named Linus Baker, who is assigned by the company that he works for, which is a kind of a fantasy company in a fantasy world. He's assigned to visit this group home on this island in the Cerulean Sea, and this group home has been run by a man named Arthur, and Arthur and the people who live in the group home are somewhat interesting. So the children they all have these kind of special magical powers, and they're kind of isolated on this island, more than kind of isolated on this island, because they aren't kind of mainstream. So there's a lot of discussion about where they would be best suited to live and who would be best suited to care for them. So Linus's role is to discover if they're being well cared for, I guess if they need to be moved, to report back. And there's kind of an ominous committee of people that are asking him to go and take this on. And so he gets to the island and he meets the children one by one. And one of them is quite frightening to him because of his identity that he claims. And again, some of the others are just kind of delightful, and some are a little bit more open to Linus than others. I love the children. I definitely can see why people love the children. There was nothing about them that I didn't enjoy. I don't know why. It took me a bit to get into it. In the end, I did give it 4 stars. I will read the second one that he released. I'm not sure about the third because I'm hearing a lot of mixed reviews about that one, but I did purchase the second one. Yeah, I really don't know why it took me so long to finish this freaking book, but it did. Then, because I was looking for summer reads and because I heard about this one on a podcast, I picked up One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. This one has a beautiful cover, and people maybe on Sarah's bookshelves, I don't know which podcast, that's terrible to say, but they were talking about it and I found it on Scribd. Okay, so the plot of One Italian Summer starts with the death of the main character, Katie's mom, Carol. And Katie and her mom, Carol, were very, very close. And her mom's death is not unexpected because she had a bout with cancer, but it shatters Katie. Her whole world is just tilted on its axis. And she is now questioning everything about her life and about how she will move on, including whether or not she wants to stay in relationship with her husband. Katie met her husband, and I think he was like her first kind of real romance, and they were young and they married kind of, right away. And she's just rethinking everything essentially. So her mom and Katie were supposed to go on this trip to Italy, and Katie decides she will go ahead and take the trip without her mom to spend some time discovering whether she wants to still be married and kind of what the meaning of life will be without Carol. And when she gets to Italy and she's staying in this place that they had arranged for them to stay in and all of this, she meets a woman who is her mom, Carol, in her mind. And that's all I'm going to say about this, except that the rest of the book is about her time in Italy with Carol and some other people that she meets and connects with. And she's very isolated from everybody else because she has chosen to lock her phone up and just be off the grid while she's on this trip. My favorite character in the entire book was Positano, was the city in Italy. And I can say that this made me want to go to Italy. It did have great summer vibes. It was well written. It didn't quite move me in the same way I think it moved the people who were reviewing it on the podcast, but I gave it 3 stars, which is a solid review. And I don't know if I would read another book by this author. I might. There are several in her body of work, so it's possible. But I'm glad I read One Italian Summer. I'm also glad I didn't purchase it because it would not be a book that I plan to read again. I finished, took me a while, The Chicago Cubs, Story of a Curse by Rich Cohen. This was my nonfiction pick for the second quarter that you all chose for me, and I really did enjoy this a lot. Let me see what I gave this because I can't remember. I gave it 4 stars. I think my favorite part of it was the part that really connected to my experience with the Cubs. So the first part of the book obviously is more of a history of the Cubs franchise and how it was created, the history of baseball essentially in the Windy City. And then later on, it delves into the periods of time, in the 60s and to current day, where I was more familiar with what was happening with the Cubs. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old before I was really kind of aware of what the Cubs were and what they did. And we were listening to baseball games on the radio and going to see them and whatnot. So once we got to that place, I was much more enlivened by this well-written nonfiction piece of work about this franchise. Rich Cohen is a prolific writer of magazine articles, and he covers a lot of different things, and so he's great at it. He's great at telling this story. I think what would have been easier for me and maybe would have elevated it to 5 stars was if it had been a little bit more linear. While it was somewhat linear, there were also some times where he would go back and forth and forth and back, and I just wasn't able to really track that easily. He gave attention to the detail that he felt was necessary, and I think that is all I really wanted in this book was really the stories that were significant in the history of this club. So that was on point. And then of course it got more and more exciting for me as he started to cover the team that ended up winning the World Series in my time on the earth, which was really one of my greatest moments in life. I will say that I think that one of my favorite parts of this too, beyond that retelling of that historical event that I was a part of, I think that the strategy that he sort of shares with us that Theo Epstein had when he purchased the club really helped me to understand kind of what was different. Because before that, you just had this sense that, and I get it, like there's been this long time sense that that the curse was what kept them from winning, but there's legitimate information about what shifted. And I think that that's important because honestly, it can't be a curse. Like it's not possible. What's very possible is that a number of outside influences and things occurred that created this time again inability for this team to win. But it certainly wasn't that these players were cursed, although there's a case to be made that players will get sort of they will get in their heads about things, and that things will happen internally for them that will create their ability to either overcome it or to succumb to it, which recently happened in a baseball series that I was watching. So the Cubs recently went to London for the series, and they had a game that they just killed it. And then they had a game that they didn't. And there was subsequently a playoff for a college team that I follow and love, which is the Florida Gators baseball team. And they played LSU, which is a team I do not root for, but my son-in-law and my daughter do. And there was a similar situation where one team just kept knocking them out of the park and the other team was just like, and then, it switches and elevates. You get in your head. And so I think that was also described very well in this, and that strategy I think is described very well. I really enjoyed this. So if you're a baseball fan, if you're a Cubs fan, I think you would really like it. And I'm happy that I got through it this in time before the end of the quarter. Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen was one of my picks for summer read this summer. And so this was the first one that I chose to start in my TBR that I shared with you. And I'm super happy that I did. This one, I've only read, I think, one other Sarah Addison Allen novel. She has a number of them. I have a couple of them on my shelves. But I would say that this one was surprisingly gorgeous for me. I was sort of taken aback by this one. So Zoe loses her mom, and she returns to where her mom has been living to sort through the things in her apartment. Zoe's been living with her dad and her stepmother and father's children for some time. She's about to enter into college, so she's that kind of age, and she travels to this apartment in a rare little town in South Carolina on Mallow Island. And there's an apartment complex called the Delawisp after these birds. The novel follows the kind of the manager of this apartment complex, as well as some of the people who live in the apartment complex, who have been very disconnected from each other. This is not a complex of people who speak to each other and are neighborly and friendly, not at all. And in fact, Zoe arrives thinking maybe that is the case, and indeed is kind of shut down from her ability to make connections with other people. So there's a quirky, enigmatic girl on the run, a grieving chef whose comfort food does not comfort him, and two estranged middle-aged sisters, and the best part, I would say, 3 ghosts. So this one, when I first talked about it, I said the font is different in this one, and the font is different when you are reading the perspectives of the ghosts, which is how you know that you are in that space. And they're all interrelated, which you know from watching my videos. If you're a frequent viewer or if you're a new subscriber, let me just say, I love books that have a connective tissue to them, that really bring people together in new ways or in unexpected ways, or just connect them to something that is kind of at the core of the novel, which in this case, I guess, is the quirkiness of these neighbors in this apartment. And I don't want to spoil anything except to say I really, really enjoyed this. It's a short read. It is very atmospheric, and you really do just see each character in their own unique way. And the way it wraps up had me in tears for sure. So 5 glorious, happy, tearful stars. So Frida McFadden is an author that a bunch of people that I'm connected to on Facebook have been reading a lot of lately. And I had not read anything by Frida McFadden until the month of June. I decided there was a lot of hype here. I had access to a couple of them on Kindle Unlimited. So I chose to begin with One by One, which ironically is a title of a novel that shows up more than once. This book starts with a woman named Claire who is packing for a trip with some friends and is describing how unhappy she is in her marriage. Her children are going to be with her sister while they are away on this kind of isolated camping trip. And she is just miserable thinking about being with her husband on this trip. And when you're introduced to her husband, you discover he's not super crazy about her either. Let me get rid of my glasses so I don't have the glare for you. So they get in this minivan and they pick up the other people that are to travel with them. And they set out on this journey to get to this isolated cabin in the woods. And they don't have great cell phone reception when they start to get off of the main highway. Some other things are revealed along the way that I will not share because I feel like that is, I liked not knowing a whole lot about this, really, to be fair. Their van breaks down though, and so they are then faced with trying to figure out how to get to where they're going and essentially to cell reception. I will say this, I read this in a half a day, like in a couple of hours. It was definitely a popcorn read. I did not stop, but I was off that day. It was my day off, so I finished Other Birds in the morning toward the to the lunch hour, and then in the afternoon I read this from cover to cover. You would think that that would mean that I would give it a high rating, and I gave it 3 stars. So again, that's not a bad rating. I felt like the writing was a little less robust than I wanted it to be. And I just found some of it, the dialogue, a little stilted. Again, I have friends that are just crazy about this woman, and I can see why, because it's a ride. It starts and it doesn't stop until it stops. Uh, so I'm not suggesting that she's a terrible writer by any stretch. I'm just saying that it kind of just didn't it didn't elevate itself to the level that would be a higher rating for me. And it was slightly predictable for me, but also I wasn't really sure how it was going to go. I didn't predict the exact ending, but I kind of had a sense of what might happen, and I was pretty right about that. But again, a lot of people I think are very, very surprised by this. I would read another one by her, which I can say this confidently because I am currently reading another one by her on my Kindle from Kindle Unlimited. So we'll see how many of those little snacks I go through before the end of the summer or the end of the year. Who knows? And then my last read of the month, which also went by very quickly for me and is a must buy for me, is No Two Persons by Erica Bauermeister. I talked about this as one of my most anticipated reads, and I was absolutely blown away by this book. While I did give 5 stars to Other Birds, this one is slightly higher in my appreciation of and enjoyment of this new author to me. I could not stop thinking about this book, wanting to read this book, talking about this book to my partner who doesn't love to talk about books. I just loved this. Okay. 5 beautiful, tearful, glorious stars to this one as well. Here's what I wrote in my review: exquisite, unique, fascinating, moving, connective. And again, this one weaves through this group of people that are presented in this novel. One book, 9 readers, 10 changed lives is what Goodreads says. It starts with Alice, who's a young girl and has an older brother, and her parents are kind of not the best. So something happens, but as a result, Alice decides she's going to write a novel, and she's in college and she's receiving some support from one of her professors, and she's really just trying to write something that is relevant and well done. She pitches it multiple times, and it finally finds a publisher, and she discovers that the book is starting to, sell. It's starting to sell a little bit. And then the entire novel introduces you to 10 different people who read Alice's book and have obviously a different situation going on and happening in their lives at the time they come into possession of or awareness of this book. And it moves each of them in a different way. I don't even want to tell you anything else except to say that I mean, I can see maybe where somebody else wouldn't like it, but honestly, there's a part of me that's like, who wouldn't love this book? Like, I just, the characters are all very different. They're all in different places. They're all in different life experiences. I think that just makes it even better. But the fact that a book can have an impact on someone in a very different way, in a very different place and time and experience, to me is kind of what I love about books. It's a celebration of books. And so in this case, the book itself and the leading character of the book are a character of their own. Although you don't really get a lot of content from the book. So it's not a book within a book scenario where you're reading the book and then no. It's just a little bite. It's just enough. It's just gorgeous. So I got this one on Kindle from my library. I highlighted the crap out of it. So if you end up with my copy some way, you will see all the areas that I highlighted in a peachy color of highlight. But that's what made me realize that if I had a physical copy of that, it would be book darted throughout. I definitely will own this. I definitely will read it again. I definitely will book dart the crap out of it. But I loved it. And I was so grateful that that was like my last read for June, because it just rounded out my entire June reading experience in a way that I couldn't have asked for more. Okay, so that is my list of 7 books that I read in the month of June and how I liked them. I can't wait to see and read your comments and hear if you've read any of these as well. If you've read another by one of these authors, do let me know which one I should pick up next. And as always, happy reading. Bye.